Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Panna Pavangadkar, and I'm from Bloomberg. I have my colleague here, Chandan Singh. So we are part of a team that we call Developer Experience, and we're responsible for really ensuring that our developers are being the most productive, are able to concentrate on really developing feature and functionality as opposed to worrying about the infrastructure that is underneath the covers. So, Bloomberg. Unfortunately, the lights don't allow me to see hand raises out here, so I'm not going to have to refrain from asking the questions I wanted to ask. But Bloomberg, most of you probably know us as a news and media company. Those in the financial industry probably understand the Bloomberg terminal and know more about the Bloomberg terminal. So what I did was I did put a picture out here so that you could see what our core product looks like, which is really we develop software which is in the business of providing information. Initially, we started with financial information, but now it's all sorts of information to high-end users of this information. How did we start down this journey of InnerSource? So InnerSource, the concept, I believe, has been around for a while. So Tim O'Reilly coined this concept a while back. We internally, around a couple of years ago, started embracing the fact that we wanted to do more collaborative development. We wanted to be able to go across the organizational boundaries a lot more than we were already doing, and be able to benefit from all the best practices that were available in the open source world. So when we started talking about collaborative development, we called it collaboratively sourced. Just looking around, we discovered that it was actually, there was a terminology out there in the industry. It was called InnerSource, and it's really bringing in open source best practices inside the enterprise. And so a couple of years ago, we formally started down that process. Of course, I don't need to go down the list of benefits that really come with it. And I guess as we share our journey, those will become more and more apparent. But basically, we decided a couple of years ago just to go into it head first, just dive into it and start, and beg for forgiveness later. And so with that, how did we go about it? Initially, we introduced the concept to say, why do we want to do this collaboration and how is it going to benefit everybody? We identified early adopters. We identified a few projects which were predominantly in the infrastructure space so that everybody could benefit from them and therefore were motivated to be able to sort of self-help themselves and move forward. We engaged a lot of people from across the board. So we have this concept called champs, which is really evangelists or people who, within their own communities, can help push forward a technology or push forward and influence other developers to adopt a good practice or a best practice. So we engaged with the champs. We engaged with at the grassroots level from a developer community. And we also sort of engaged the senior management to say, whether you believe it or not, just let us go ahead with it and just give us the support to not say no. You don't have to go out and bless it. Just don't say no. Just don't stop people from being able to contribute across organizational boundaries. Created the champions, which was the evangelizing and being able to go across and get other developers and early adopters to talk about it. And last but not the least, we got our CIO to just make a statement to say that he's in favor of trying this out. And that really went a long way in terms of the sponsorship to at least get started. So, change. You must be all familiar with your own practices as well as in general, changing habits can be hard. And with 5,000 developers, you have all sorts of resistance to change. It could be, religion to the way I work, or it could be pure arrogance and being obstinate to, just doing it the way I do it. It could be the fact that I do it best. You have no clue how to write this stuff down. Whatever I produce is the best code, and what you've produced is probably not worthy of being, merged into my code base. trusted committers, every repository or every few developers decide that they are the ones who can only manage this code base, and anybody else who comes and introduces or contributes any change is probably going to break my code. Those are organizationally or traditionally the things that kind of kept people back. So what we decided to do was really come up with a set of best practices, and I think Chandan's going to dive in a little bit more into that. But we started to break away at these organizational barriers that existed. So first things first, we insisted that all repositories would be public first. Very few repositories will be allowed to go private, and storing my private keys or storing my passwords in my repository was not an acceptable reason for having a private repository. We also started to encourage people to make sure that they were not sitting on pull requests or just ignoring them. And I've seen this theme throughout a lot of the presentations today, where the concept of pull requests was just ignored because people did not want to either spend the time, did not have the time to spend. It was not as a part of your the agile workflow. They weren't getting enough time to be put into it. So we had to start working with product managers, with Scrum Masters to say, how can we take away some time from the time that we're accounting for to be pushed towards saying we want to be able to accept code changes. And for that, we're going to have to set aside time to do some code reviews as well as pull requests, to be able to review the pull requests. And then be able to create the trusted committers as a community. So it's not just the team, not just the organizational team, but also be able to say, from the community, from these people who are contributing, be able to start to create trusted committers from there. We have another thing. In the first screen that I showed you, the terminal, we call things that we put up in the terminal called functions. That's just the terminology used internally. So we created a function called sauce, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but really it was about introducing the fact that we can put in help wanted tags and be able to gamify the entire, which repository is public, who's put in help wanted tags, who's going and contributing and being able to self-help themselves, as well as make sure that we have a contributing.md out there which states out the rules of engagement really clearly. So this is a few of the things that I touched upon from accepting the change perspective. It's complicated. It's across various dimensions. There is risk involved with being able to get people who don't know my code base or understand my code base to be able to submit pull requests to me. There is commitment both from a time perspective, but also, as I touched upon change, I have to be committed to the fact that I'm willing to review somebody else's code. I'm willing to be able to take this change in the culture. And that has been probably the toughest part for us to overcome, because we've been used to working on our own siloed ways. And being able to break that down was probably the largest factor. One of the things that worked the best in this space was really encouraging a lot of the people to encourage their team leaders, to encourage their tech leads to buy into the idea. So it really wasn't saying, thou shalt do this. It really was saying, hey, this is good for our team to be able to move our project forward faster than we could earlier, than we could ourselves. Also, when I touched upon the rules of engagement, it was really important for us to very clearly specify what the rules of engagement are, what are the best practices for our code base, what must people put together, what kind of test coverage that what we wanted in there, what kind of acceptance criteria we would want, what kind of comments we wanted, all of that to be clearly listed out, because we discovered that every team does not work the same way. While our workflows may be similar, there were very specific guidelines that every team wanted to abide by. Some were stricter, some were slightly more relaxed, and we wanted to make sure that each team can get the autonomy that they wanted to, or retain the autonomy that they had been used to, but still open up the code base. Buy-in. This continues to be our toughest part because from a product perspective, our business and product want their teams to obviously, do if we have 110% or this concept of 120%, actually it's the 80-20, but I keep calling it the 120 because nobody really has an 80-20 concept going on. So for the 110 or the 120, when we talk to product and business, the additional 10% they want contributed towards moving that additional feature that they could potentially move forward. And so we've been working really hard with them, and we're getting some traction, but it's the chicken and egg story. You've got to show that it really works before you actually get that blessed time, versus going and asking for permission and then moving it forward. So I'm not saying we've perfected that yet, but we continue to do that. And I'll share some tips on that. And of course, the last one being, it's my baby, don't touch it, I don't trust you. And really doing away with that I don't trust you culture has been interesting. I already touched upon some of this, and some of this has come up in some of the other talks as well, which is really around engaging and understanding that when people want to be able to contribute to your repositories, they come from different diverse backgrounds, and they have different styles. And so, breaking that culture of I'm going to bite your head off because whatever you submitted is not good, or you didn't listen to my instructions, or you didn't read the contributing.md, but being able to engage in a much more meaningful way. We've seen cases where somebody puts in a pull request and it'll just be squashed down because I don't agree. We had to start to literally stalk those areas and start to encourage those people to start to have an engaging conversation as to why they think something that was submitted as a pull request doesn't gel with them, or what additional conversation needed to be had. Now, it does seem heavy that we're having these one-on-one conversations, but this is where, when I touched upon our champions, our evangelists, all of this community comes in to be able to help us move the thing forward in a meaningful way. Embracing the differences, and of course, building this culture of mentoring and coaching. It's really about being able to say everybody has to take the responsibility, everybody has to take the commitment to move this collaboration forward. And what we found was that as teams understood that they could self-help themselves, or they could improve a particular area for moving their product forward, we started to see a lot more contributions coming, a lot more commitment to saying, fine, we'll persist and persevere and go through some of these challenges that I touched upon earlier. Teamwork. We had to sort of put together a lot of clarity around roles and responsibilities, around training up our trusted committers as to how they need to, one, train their team, build their pipeline of trusted committers, and what are the best practices for them to be able to move that forward. We did a little bit of skunk works here, so we sort of stole time for coaching, we stole time for mentoring, as opposed to getting that blessed time. And for a few of these projects, just to prove it out. Similarly, as I said, the 80-20, we call them X projects. So 80% is working on projects that we are assigned to do, but 20% is that, and it varies team to team. So don't quote me on the 80-20. It's really, some teams are 90-10, some teams are 80-20, some teams are 110. With those X projects, really started to excite the people, because developers would then go off and do a skunkworks project or an X project, and it seems nicer to call it an X project instead of a skunkworks project. Call it an X project, and then get the contributions to that. And we found that a lot of times those X projects turned out to be, one, community driven because it was a good idea, somebody else agreed with me, and two, moved forward our agenda much faster and got adopted as more and more of the workflows that were broadly adopted. It also helped from the coaching and mentoring perspective, because now you had people going across team boundaries, going across organizational boundaries, and being able to engage on something that was a common theme for multiple people to move that X project forward. I can't emphasize enough the time. We are all stressed on time, so that continues to be a challenge for us. What really did help, and what really did, when we embarked on this journey was, as I said, some of the tooling around it. Opening up the code bases, we came from SVN, CVS, Rational, converged all to Git. We had our own implementation of Git. And then when we brought in GitHub, we sort of laid down these draconian rules around saying, and I call them draconian because we made the statements about it being open, but we didn't really enforce it. But just being out there talking about the fact that it is an open code base without even enforcing it made sure that people were more open to the idea as opposed to coming in with closed repositories. So people who wanted to keep their repositories private initially resisted coming on to our implementation of GitHub Enterprise. But as they came to know, and the word started spreading to say that this tooling enables them to have a better experience during their development process, they started coming in with private repositories. And we would go in to check who is coming in with private repositories and why. So the tooling did play an important role for us to be able to open up these repositories. The agile implication, I'm not even going to get into that again because of the fact that you need the product buy-in, you need to be able to do that. But as I said, some of the things that we tried were really, we pushed our way in and then apologized for doing the skunkworks or the X project. Some of the other creative things that we tried. So hackathons. We have something called the DevX Hackathon. We try to do it on a quarterly basis. And really, it's bringing together a lot of our engineers to work on ideas that they wanted to see other teams moving forward with. And so we have this half-a-day effort where we put forward ideas, and then people get to vote on which ideas we should move forward with, and then collaborate on that. That sort of encouraged more and more of the collaboration on a particular project or functionality as opposed to anything else. I spoke about this, the blessed projects, and so we started challenging that with our X projects, and a lot of the X projects have actually moved forward. And so what we're going to do next is I'm going to hand over to Chandan to really talk about some of the X projects that made our GitHub integration way better and our developer workflow way better than we had in the past.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So far, I guess we have talked about why inner sourcing works and sort of how it was useful for us. But let's dive into a little bit details about how you might start to do it if you have a, let's say, a GitHub Enterprise installation, and what kind of tools and best practices that work for us, which might be helpful for you as well. So let's start by imagining a scenario where you're working on your cool weekend project, and you find a bug in this nasty library that you want to fix. And that is your sort of most impediment to getting your cool weekend project to work. But you have no idea where the source code lives. You don't know how to build this thing. You have no idea how to test your change if you ever manage to make a pull request. So this was kind of one of the problems that we are trying to overcome. So I think there are really two parts to this problem. One part is how do you really find your source code, and that is a problem in itself. And second part is, once you have the source code, how do you know how to build that thing and how to test that piece of software? So I think adopting GitHub Enterprise kind of solved the first part of the puzzle for us. So it's quite easy to search across organizations, across your entire installation, how to find your project. But the second part is still a problem, that if you're given a source code, you don't really automatically know how it will build. And since we have such a broad array of projects and build systems and so on and so forth in our organization, that it's really not feasible to imagine that all of them will be using the exact same build process or even the same tools. So we decided to adopt a concept that is pretty popular in the open source community, which is to have a contributing.md in your repository. And I think this solves a lot of problems in of itself. So you can describe how they should start interacting with your project, whether they should open an issue first or open a pull request first, how they should build your project, how would they test their changes, and how would they do it locally. And you can start And we found out that you could start by having a really simple concept in there. We just say that, okay, this is how you build our project, and that's pretty much it, and we are improving on this document. I think that's a valid start. But as your project grows, you will eventually find that even your contributors will start contributing even to this contributing document. So I think which is pretty nice. So once you have set this up, if someone somehow lands to your repository, they will at least have some idea of how to work with your software. The next problem is, how do people find issues to work on? So one scenario was where I knew what I wanted to fix. The other scenario is I just want to contribute some of my X time, as we talked about earlier, to a certain project, and what issues should I work on? And even what repositories should I sort of find those issues to work on? So I think if you see this help wanted tag here, which I think was mentioned a little bit before, is that we encourage people to tag their issues with help wanted in cases where it's reasonable to assume that people outside their immediate team can help there. And also in cases where they genuinely want help in some cases. For instance, I'm a backend developer, and I'm writing a front-end app, and I have no idea how to do that. Or if I have a nasty bug in JavaScript, I might tag this with help wanted and ask for support with the CHAMPS initiative that we have. So we built this screen, and this screen runs in our Bloomberg terminal. And this is called Sauce Go, which is a play on the word open source sauce. So what this screen shows you is that it shows you the repositories on the left-hand side and different statistics about that repository on the right-hand side. And this is, I guess, the idea of gamification that Panna was talking about earlier. So given a repository, tell me how many contributors it has. So having more contributors is good. Having how many stars it has and how many help me issues it has. So on the rightmost column, you will find the help me issues, which is the issues that you might want to work on if you are an external contributor. OK, so excellent. So now you are an external contributor. You have found an issue to work on. You have managed to build a project. Everything builds successfully. So now what? So now you would want to submit that set of changes for code review. So code review is, I guess, pretty important, as I will not go into details of why we should do code review, and I think all of you will agree that we should not ship code to production without code review. So, and some of this content is taken before GitHub 2.6 Enterprise came out. And one of the problems that we had before that was it was hard for a contributor and even multiple reviewers to figure out what a given reviewer has said. And let me explain that. Let's say I'm a reviewer, and I say, oh, these set of changes look good to me, but it will be better with these extra set of fixes. So what's exactly meant there? Did they want you to merge a pull request and just to make a note that it could be made better? Or did they want you to make those fixes and only then merge your pull request? And I guess the problem was that there was no easy way for us to represent statuses. By status, I mean not these statuses, but status as in whether it needs work or whether it needs review or what is needed to get this merged. So we decided, as we are all programmers, we decided to solve that problem by writing a bot of our own. So we wrote a bot, which we call PR secretary or pull request secretary. And what that bot will do is it will listen for certain keywords in your comments. So it will listen for keywords such as LGTM, BRB, and NOPE, and map them to these kind of GitHub statuses over here. So LGTM, for instance, stands for looks good to me. This is a very common acronym. So that will map to a green status here, and you would see here that, OK, that reviewer has kind of approved your changes, and this is the before the approve feature came out. So you could do those things. You could map LGTM to success, NOPE to a red cross, which means something really needs to be fixed here, and BRB to say that, OK, I will get back to this review in some time. So I think quite a bit of that functionality is not taken care by the GitHub review functionality. But there are also a couple of other neat features that we built. One of them is called Fix Me's. So Fix Me's is you can imagine Fix Me's as a set of to-do list. So you have a GitHub issue or pull request open, and then you want a list of things in there to be fixed before pull requests get merged. So you can list them out as checkpoints, but that doesn't quite necessarily work in all cases. So we wanted those things to be shown here as statuses. For example, this thing here, the first status, says fix me, fix that typo. So you can have those several fix me's in your pull request, and then once the original contributor realizes that, OK, I need to fix that, they can fix that, and then they can mark this fix me as fixed, again, by using a comment which says issue 1 is fixed using the standard syntax that this bot recognizes. So that was our first integration, which is called PR Secretary. Then we realized that a lot of people some people in our company, they like to use Fabricator for code reviews. And one of the reasons for that was that it allows you to see all the reviews that you are involved in just on one single screen so that you can easily sort of navigate to all the reviews that you are part of. It also offers some neat functionalities around how you can sort of comment on multiple lines. But that's not what I'm talking about here. The point of this talk is that someone realized that it would be really nice if they could link a GitHub pull request to Fabricator. So enter another bot called Hubricator, and as the name suggests, is a link between GitHub and Fabricator, and hence the name Hubricator. And this guy will create a Fabricator review for each pull request that you create in GitHub. And then you can go back, review that pull request, and whatever operations you do on that pull request will again be represented here in form of these statuses. So I think generally we agree that these statuses are one of the central points of where all the interactions could sort of talk together and they could come together. OK, so you have submitted your pull request. Some of the contributors have reviewed it. What next? Well, test coverage. We would not want to merge a pull request without passing some tests. So we decided to write another bot that we called Mariner. And what this bot is going to do is, without going into much technicality of why we need another build system, but what this bot is essentially going to do is, this is essentially going to look for a Docker file in your repository. And if it finds that Docker file, it's going to build that Docker file and show results over here in the format of where each step corresponds to one instruction in your Docker file. The reason we did this was we found that it's really easy to reproduce this locally. So once you have this Docker file running in your CI framework, you can also take the Docker file elsewhere and just run it, and you would expect to see the same results. So you get reproducibility for free. Another thing that you get for free here is that this system then becomes really scalable, so you don't have lots of agents and lots of master and slaves. So your system is really scalable, and you can just have more and more of these worker nodes, which will keep processing these pull requests for you. So it's really easy for us to sort of scale out. And the way that we started this was, again, as an X project. And at the time, it was only our team that was using it. And now I think roughly 10% of the organizations that are in our entire GitHub installation, roughly 10% of the organizations are using Mariner now, which I think cool. And since it's released, this is not even properly released yet. So this was, I think, made it available for everyone, I think, over half a year ago. So that's the generic somewhat gist of what Mariner does. But what I wanted to focus on was that all these 3 or 4 integrations that I talked about, all these were started as X projects. Some of these were not even X projects within our team. They were applications teams that they just wanted to fix their workflow or make it better. And since then, some of these have turned into blessed projects, as we might call them. And some of them are still our community-driven X projects. And the point, I guess, here is that these tools that were developed to facilitate better inner sourcing and better standards, they themselves benefited quite a bit from inner sourcing. So I think that is a great example of how inner sourcing works in practice and how we might benefit from it. And now I'd like to hand over to Panna to wrap up.
Cool. Thank you. So to wrap up, basically, I call them stretch projects. It really is a matter of being able to say, how can we find the low-hanging fruit? Which are when you get started within your organizations, because I'm sure your organizations already do this, the collaboration across teams. It's just that it's not called InnerSource. It may not be blessed. So when you do want to get started, it's really identifying the low-hanging fruit and be able to sponsor more of these cross-functional projects that benefit more teams and be able to get the buy-in. Shared infrastructure projects was an easy way for us to get started. And I say it was an easy way for us to get started because it came under my team, so I could just say, hey, we are going to make every project InnerSource. However, as I mentioned earlier, it's also getting the teams to buy into that concept. It's also getting the teams to be able to embrace that change, that cultural change. We have identify common pain points and be able to say, if I can encourage other developers to be able to contribute to the pain point that they're facing by opening up my repository, maybe we can start to get others to do the same. So it's really by emulation. It is by being able to showcase that chicken and egg story. And that's what it boils down to. It's creating more and more opportunities for people to go across the organization to be able to contribute. There's a lot more to be done yet, and we have a list of to-dos which are in our backlog, but we wanted to share this story anyways at this point. So that's my getting started. Basically, it's a three-pronged approach. Find the early adopters, evangelize, and eventually get the sponsorship. Thank you.